What's up YouTube, Eben Star here, and we're back with another painting video. Tonight I'm working on the Children of December crew for Rasputina. This is the Malifaux 2nd edition plastic crew, and right now I'm working on all the ice gammon and the ice golem, and we're using our airbrush. Appropriate, I felt, to use the airbrush given that all these models are basically the same color scheme, and it's a very simple color scheme, so you can get this done very quickly with an airbrush. So I'm starting with some Vallejo Model Air, some light blue, and I'm adding a little bit of a lighter color to it to start doing the highlights. Now, as far as the airbrush is concerned, I do use a couple of different types of airbrushes. I don't consider myself an expert on the matter, so tonight I am using the just the cheap Chinese, the Masters. You can actually see a little bit of spitting there. That I have to adjust my pressure to make sure that I'm not getting any of that on the model, but it seems to be going okay. Now, for the general style airbrush work, I will use the Masters airbrush for this. If I'm doing fine detail work, I will move in and use like a Badger Renegade Chrome. That's one of my favorite airbrushes for doing detail work. But yeah, the cheap Chinese, it's believe it or not, I consider it to be fairly reliable airbrush for this type of work. So you can see me knocking out some highlights there. Now there is a little bit of a trick to do that when you are doing highlights using an airbrush. You can see that my airbrush is always at that same angle, and I'm spraying down on top of the model at that 45-degree angle, just moving up a little bit lighter colors and doing a few more layers. You can see that the highlights are starting to naturally work up, and now I've switched over to an ink, so I'm using a blue ink this time. So I've done a little bit of like pre-highlighting, or a little bit of a gradient behind that, and that will show through the ink here. So again, still using the Masters for this ink, and I really like ink for ice because inks they'll settle into the right places, and when they dry they have a little bit of a sheen to them, but when I go back and highlight them again, you're not going to notice much. So come back in, a little bit of a highlight there. It's actually quite light. I think I go back actually, and yeah, this is too light, so I'm going to go back and color it down a little bit by adding a little bit more blue. So yeah, there we go. So I've got the right color that I want there, and just working in those highlights again. So you see, I'll actually end up doing this process twice because the ice gammon are a little bit tricky. I mean, they're tiny, which really isn't the problem. It's the smoother bodies. The metal ones were a little bit easier to airbrush because they had thicker grooves, kind of like the way the ice golem is. Ice golem here, the new one, is kind of a dream for airbrushing because you can just catch any angle that you want. The angles are so sharp on the ice golem that it's really not a problem. So you can see I'm coming back in with the highlights, and you can see it's a very stark highlight, which is cool. I really like it. I'm going to calm it down a little bit with a wash and come back in with another highlight. But so far so good. I mean, it's this is the first night, and I'm just messing around with the airbrush, trying to get those gradients where I want them. So I'm very selective about where I'm putting this really light color. Just a little bit there on the shoulders, got a little bit on the face. You can see I'm just hitting the extreme high edges of the model. Now, in all honesty, you could go through and you can overbrush, or you can highlight up to that, and it's not that big of a difference. But on the ice golem, it really will be a difference. On the ice gammon, it's not that big of a difference. So here we go with the second night, and I'm coming in with a wash. This is I believe this is the Citadel blue wash. So I blue wash them and highlight one more time with that ice blue. And now I moved on to the other two models in the crew, and I'm going to spend the majority of the second night on these models. So right now, painting in Rasputina's flesh. So I'm started in with the flesh base, working on Rasputina and the guy, the victim of the Wendigo. So I go flesh base up to light, and I wash with the Seraphim Sepia, and then I'm I blend my way all the way up to Vallejo Model Color Light Flesh. This is a pinkish flesh, and now I'm mixing a green, an intermediate green, and a basalt gray for most of the body of the victim. Now I follow box art when I'm doing this, and unfortunately for the box art of the M2E stuff there's a lot of common colors, which is okay. I mean, there are a lot of like muted tones like that gray-green that carries on to Rasputina's main body as well. So you'll see a lot of that green-gray going down. And I noticed that that's the same in a lot of these other kits too. They use a lot of the green-gray. They use a lot of kind of a mustard yellow color, and then they have a dark blue, kind of a blue-gray that they use. And seeing how these are kind of kits that I'm putting up for sale, I don't want to deviate too far from the model art, because I think people that really will buy painted miniatures are kind of into how that model art is. If they wanted something specific, they often just go to directly to a commissioned painter. So here's that mustard yellowy color that's going down on the victim here, and that's actually most of his body. So that's going to go down. This is Vallejo Model Color. I believe it's either a khaki gray or a yellow green. You can use either, because I've used both and they're both pretty good. So now we're working on the Wendigo a little bit. That's a basalt gray base coat going down. The Wendigo is a fun model. I like his pose. I like the energy of the model. Just do a little bit of highlighting there on the grays, and that's what I'll continue to do, is just keep mixing, blending in some whites to the grays. And now I'm working on the trim of Rasputina's clothing there, and I start with that kind of mid-gray there with the intent of highlighting up to white. You can see that I actually carry over colors from one model to the next. That's a fast way of doing it. And the other thing about painting this crew all at the same time is that it really is efficient, because you always have something to paint while something else is drying. For example, the wash on the ice stuff, I can be doing all these grays and highlighting it up as I'm doing there on the Wendigo. So you always have something to do. If you can kind of schedule out your time and what colors are going to go on what models when, you can actually break this out into a fairly quick job. In particular, this Rasputina crew. Now, I've painted in my career, I don't know, maybe, I want to say about 6 or 7 different Rasputina crews, including the alt sculpt Rasputina, the Avatar. I mean, I have a lot of them, and I've given a lot of those away. This is the one and only M2E Rasputina that I'm painting, and it's a cool model. I'm a little disappointed in how she's sort of frigid and cold and holding herself. That's really not Rasputina that matches the fluff, at least not the fluff that I read. But it's still pretty cool model, and the face, you can put expression in the face, not quite that kind of smirky alt sculpt face that I really enjoyed painting. So now giving this green-gray a wash here. I believe this is a mix of the Agrax Earthshade with just a hint of the Thraka green in it. So just to match that green-gray, you can see I'm coming in there with, looks like this is an Agrax Earthshade that I've mixed with some sepia, and that's coming in on the victim's body there. Now that wash, you can see, is coming in quite heavy. I'm actually going to come back in and brush some of it off. So there you can see, I'm coming in with just a clean brush and just pulling the excess stuff off. You've got to do that pretty quickly when you're working with washes. So, if you're going to come in kind of haphazardly like I did, make sure that you're working fast enough to be able to pull off the excess. So I give that another highlight of the original color, kind of that mustard yellow color. You can see that coming in. And that's, you know, this is basic painting 101, base coat, wash, highlight, and that's typically all you really need for these Malifaux plastics. They do have some detail to them, and but it's really more about getting your layers in right, your color selection, and if you pick the right base color on these, I've noticed that you can paint them up incredibly fast. So here's us going through the second night. Now I'm putting the details in on Rasputina and just painting in the goggles. To paint the goggles in, I kind of go in with a white, then I'll hit them with a blue wash, and then hit them again with the sky blue, and I do a little white dot on them. So painting is finally done. But we are working with the snow now. I put a couple of tufts on those cork bases, and I've got some baking soda and glue. One thing different that I do here is I put in just a tinge of light blue into my snow, just to give it that little extra glow to it, which is cool. When all this stuff is said and done, and you can see it, most people don't even know that there's blue in there, but it comes out really clean. It's a little less yellow, and you get that consistency right with the baking soda and the glue. You can go powdery, you can go loose and watery, and in some places I go both, because in some cases I want that loose and watery kind of running off the edges of the rocks there, so they form kind of like fake icicles. But towards the top I'll go a little more powdery with the mixture, you know, to kind of make it look like snow is building up. So there's the last of the snow going down. I am just about done with the models, and there they are. They're actually drying. The black rims are drying on these. I try to do a little bit of a just a little bit of a close-up here, but the camera does not want to behave. But anyway, that's it for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed. These are going to be on eBay. They're actually being sold by this Wednesday, so if you're interested, go check them out on eBay, and thanks for watching.